Hello, my name is Caroline Thomas and I'm here today with Mary Woolley. We are researchers for a project called the Beginner Teacher in Science and Religion Encounter. This is a project being undertaken by the National Institute for Christian Education Research at Canterbury Christ Church University. This project is funded by the Templeton World Charity Foundation. Today we are talking to you about the experiences of beginner teachers as to how knowledge works in science religion encounters in the classroom. In our presentation, we'd like to share some of the findings from our research investigating student teachers' experiences of planning for and teaching science religion encounters in the classroom. We consider that a science religion encounter is one where teachers bring science into a RE lesson or religion into a science lesson, which can be prepared or might arise naturally whilst teaching. For example, when children ask challenging questions about religion, science, or the big questions that cannot be addressed by science or religion alone. The research findings are based on 17 focus groups with a total of 75 students, each lasting about 1 hour. We investigated students' views across 6 universities in England. We asked students their views about what the purposes of science and religion education were, what anxieties they may have experienced or challenges they might have faced when planning for and teaching science and religion encounters. The research was underpinned by a strong ethical framework. We analysed the data and produced a survey to investigate early career teachers' perspectives on science and religion encounters in the classroom. In the first part of the presentation, I share some of the findings related to the primary students. One of the most interesting findings that was until the students came together in the focus group, the majority indicated they'd never thought about including science in an RE lesson before or religion in a science lesson. Very few students had ever observed any science religion encounters being taught or seen teachers managing these whilst in placement schools. We had comments like, "I can't say I've ever thought about it. To be honest, it's never come up in my thoughts. It's not something I would have considered. I've never seen it happen." And science and religion were taught separately on my placement. A few students mentioned observing or dealing with spontaneous encounters that arose during lessons. An example given by a student in a Year 1 class was who came first, the dinosaurs or God? Typically, students admitted feeling uncertain about how to respond to and manage such questions, which influenced their confidence to manage science and religion encounters. In terms of their university tuition, a few students gave examples of tutors seeking to promote cross-disciplinary approaches to learning, but indicated that science was rarely put together with religion. A barrier was that these subjects were normally taught in separate subject silos. They indicated that tutors, or they themselves, tended to opt not to consider science and religion together, as this was more complex than exploring some of the relationships that exist between other disciplines. In this slide, we look at the type of anxieties that student teachers experienced about engaging with science and religion encounters. An important issue that arose was that students strongly perceived the need to fit into their school and experience that sense of belonging. They indicated a desire to follow the school's ethos in terms of its values and classroom practices. Students were eager to demonstrate compliance to school pedagogical practices and appeared to look for clues when observing teaching so as to make sense of the expectations being placed in them. Students expressed concerns about causing any offence to staff and pupils about material they taught and becoming the source of complaints that might arise from parents that their class teachers or their mentors might be asked to deal with. Interestingly, there were contrasting views about whether it be more challenging to plan and teach science linked with religion in church schools or in community schools with a religious foundation. In schools with a religious foundation, student teachers appeared concerned about them imposing their faith position on children. They considered it important not to do this, and that children should have the freedom required to develop their own faith position. They also perceived that it was important to use the correct language when discussing aspects of faith, which required advanced preparation and subject knowledge. Now speak about some of the challenges and barriers to teaching science and religion encounters. In terms of these perceived challenges and barriers, student teachers perceived that they were challenged to master the level of subject knowledge required to deliver the whole primary curriculum to the expected standard. They suggested they needed the personal confidence, time and space to experiment with planning and implementing science and religion encounters. The importance placed on English and maths curriculum and the pressures associated with assessment of pupil achievement in these subjects meant that they prioritised getting to grips with the teaching of English and mathematics as their central priority. They felt that if more importance was given to science and RE in the curriculum, then teachers generally might be more open and willing to plan for and address science and religion encounters. A significant barrier was actually students not having the opportunity to observe RE to affect their pedagogical content knowledge. Students held different views on children's ages being a barrier to putting science and religion together in a lesson. They indicated that it might be far too complicated to try and get primary children to think about science and religion together and to reflect on this relationship. For example, a student said, "I can feel it's easier to have this black and white style of teaching rather than adding this complexity, this area of greyness." This complexity of the relationship between science and religion was making it hard for student teachers to explore this with children at this early stage of their teaching career. The findings also highlighted issues with students knowing where to go to for support and advice on teaching science and religion encounters. Interestingly, mentors were rarely mentioned as sources of support, and when prompted, students indicated that they needed first of all to please their mentors as a matter of assessment, as a matter for assessment purposes.
We now move to look at the secondary focus groups. There is a slight imbalance in the focus group data here, with the number of student RE teachers volunteering for the focus groups being substantially higher than the number of student science teachers. RE teachers gave a very wide range of ideas about the purpose of RE teaching. The majority emphasised knowledge of religions, but they also talked about lived experience, belief and faith. There was self-discovery for students was seen as important, but they also wanted to focus on giving tools for intellectual inquiry. When science teachers came to talk about the purpose of RE, there was again a range of answers. For one or two, there was a complete misconception of what happens in the RE classroom. The first student here says, "Last week I taught about how the solar system was created. A religious aspect might disagree with it, but also comment that God made the earth, the solar system, and so on. The student seems to think that RE will always promote a religious view and therefore disagree with science." Other science teachers talked about values, in particular tolerance. Here in quote 2, "I think it's really important for teaching those kind of key fundamental values of tolerance and being able to listen to others and being able to make appropriate debate." Several of the science teachers talked about teaching tolerance in RE. However, none of the RE teachers mentioned teaching tolerance. I wondered whether the science teachers held a rather outdated view of what happened in RE based on their own school experience, and therefore wondered how and when teachers are expected to develop their understanding of what other subjects are doing. Science teachers didn't mention religion at all in their conversations about the purpose of RE. But also, they didn't seem to pick up on any purpose of RE that intersected with their own teaching, e.g. philosophy or different arguments for the creation of the universe. When we come to look at the purpose of science from the science teachers, we found that unlike RE, there was a unified tone of response surrounding the rather generic phrase of how the world works. This was explained in practical terms by different student science teachers, e.g. how the body works or how to wire a plug. A minority gave more ambitious, perhaps philosophical approaches, for example, providing a foundation for wonder in science, or explaining the limitations of the world around us and that we don't know everything. It was clear that the strong scientific purpose, how the world works, had filtered through to RE teaching community, as several reiterated the exact phrase that science is about how the world works. It was, however, clear that a few knowledgeable RE teachers, perhaps with a philosophy background, were able to give a more sophisticated response about the nature and purpose of science than the science teachers themselves. For example, here in the yellow quote, I think there is a similarity between the course of inquiry with science and religion. What I mean by that is that it is a search for truth. So it's a search for understanding the world that we're a part of. I think the main difference is within what parameters are you searching for the truth. So I think the parameters for philosophy are broader because you're questioning the frameworks of reality as opposed to accepting certain frameworks such as theory through observation in science. One university in our selection of 6 ran a specific joint session for PGCE science and RE students. We interviewed PGCE students there across 2 different cohorts. Students were unanimous that it was a really important session. Mixed groups were given a topic or controversial issue and tasked to write a lesson plan. One issue raised by the RE students in talking about the session was that the science teachers couldn't really see the point of incorporating any talk about religion into their lessons. In the first quote here, the science teachers struggled to see the purpose or the role of incorporating religion into their teaching strategy. I mean, that could really be off the mark, but just from the group I was with, that seemed to be the case. And the second student agreed. It was the same for my group. I feel like they seemed a lot more set in their views in the science bit than like we were. And I feel like we saw the benefits of bringing their subjects into ours rather than them bringing ours into theirs. They didn't seem to have a lot of knowledge about ethics at all. A third student here had a different experience and found that they were quite fascinated by the conversation that came between the science and the RE teachers. Science teachers reporting on the joint session agreed with the RE teachers that it was important, but perhaps didn't approach it in the same open-minded way. The first student here says the RE student was she said she was religious and had come from a religious family. However, she had quite a lot of scientific views. So she kind of spoke about how, in her opinion, different scientific views could interlink with some things in RE. So she said she was open-minded to different outcomes, which was fantastic. There seems to be an element of surprise here from the science teacher that religious belief and scientific views might be compatible. What exactly is fantastic here? That she's not too religious? That she can agree with him? The second quote here, I mean, for me, I don't think it would change my view personally, because my view would be particularly kind of like the science and what I've seen. There's something here about not wanting to be changed, but also something about epistemology. This student believes in evidence and what he's seen. Does he need to be introduced to the idea that there might be other ways of knowing? So moving on now to the survey responses, you can see from this graph that we have a wide range of responses from primary, secondary science and secondary RE teachers, dominated by primary, obviously, but there are enough responses from secondary science and secondary RE teachers to be able to give some valid considerations to their views in this matter. The survey only closed a couple of weeks ago, so we're not in a position to share much of the quantitative data. However, here are some initial findings on how different groups of teachers ranked the purpose of their subject. This graph shows the purpose of science. You can see that the large majority of beginning primary teachers, alongside a large number of the secondary science teachers, ranked first to stimulate, nurture children's curiosity and capacity to raise questions. Although the highest ranking purpose of science among science teachers was actually to develop positive scientific attitudes and values such as cooperation, respect for evidence, concern for life, and the preservation of the environment. This is in contrast to what RE teachers ranked first as the purpose of science, to teach children the facts and knowledge needed to make sense of the natural world. In terms of the purpose of RE, there is a similar split. Beginning primary teachers and science teachers view the primary purpose of RE as to provide values education which combats discrimination. However, the subject specialists, the RE teachers, appear to be more divided about the purpose of the subject, with equal numbers prioritising to provide a values education which combats discrimination, to acquire knowledge about religions and worldviews, and to develop flexibility of mind and make the familiar unfamiliar. At this early stage of our research analysis, we have drawn out some tentative conclusions on this slide. The ones I would like to prioritise are: the first, we feel that we need opportunities for dialogue between subject teachers at secondary level, starting in initial teacher education, and primary teachers are demanding more time for RE and their ITE programmes and more opportunities to observe the teaching of RE in schools in order to build their competence about the teaching of RE.